Okay, guess what today is? Today is, obviously it's Tuesday, not to be confused with the second Monday, right? Hopefully you're not having a Monday. It's all good, right? Beautiful day, good morning at Jeep, with the doors on because it was cold. But anyway, put the doors on, the heat works. But anyway, so we are moving into AutoCAD this week. Some of you guys are like, but I'm not done with all my other stuff. Well, you need to get moving that way because we're into AutoCAD now. And I am recording this, and we're going to go through this. So we covered Word, we've done Excel, we've done a little bit of computer stuff. So now you should be digital literate. If you weren't before, now you are, right? Put a little stamp on there, make at least a C in this class, and you're good, right? I expect everybody to make an A, but you know, that's just me. Okay, so AutoCAD. Hopefully you can get it to come up. If you're using 2025, the server should work, and you don't necessarily have to sign in, but you can. And if you want it at home, either way, you really should go ahead and get one set up. If you haven't, we did that on the first day, went through and figured out how to do an Autodesk login and so on. And I can go back and we can go over that, but we've kind of covered that a couple different times. So that's a not today problem for me to go over, but that is if you need help with that, then you send me an email saying, hey, Mr. Doty, I still haven't done that. Can you explain how to do that? And we can go from there. And we'll take care of you one-on-one. So, AutoCAD. We talked about what is CAD the other day. We took our little quiz on it. And so everybody should have their books, hopefully. And we're going to start in on Chapter 2. If I can get my book in without knocking everything else off. There we go. Now, Chapter 2 is probably, well, it should be, the longest chapter in the book. Do you know why it's the longest chapter in the book? Because it's the most important chapter in the book. And it is the beginning, as Antoine said. Because this goes over all of the commands that you're going to learn how to use. And then we're going to apply them as we keep rocking and rolling on through here. The way the book's set up, odd chapters are set up for like knowledge content, okay? So like Chapter 1, Intro to CAD, what the heck is CAD, what is design, that kind of thing. Chapter 3, what is multi-view projection? You're like, what? 5 is pictorial drawings. What are those? You know, and I have a quiz and on there. Usually the odd ones are just a quiz. There may be some little worksheets that you take the quiz on to help you learn the content. The even ones are then 7's over dimensioning. The even ones are then you apply it. Here's how you do it in AutoCAD. Okay? So that's how the book's set up. We're going to do the first 8 chapters. We've already done the first one. And we're going to end with Chapter 8 when we finish up the class. Okay? So, get out my spectacles here. Chapter 2 starts on 2-1, which obviously is way over somewhere. That doesn't really help you unless you can find, actually, where you need to be is 2-5, I suppose. So anyway, if you look for 2-5, that's where we're going to start from. Now, the tutorials in the book are not that great. I'll just say it. The book that we had when I first started teaching here was awesome. Had really good tutorials, step by step, made sense. These, they're okay. Now, does that mean they're bad? No, they're just different. And I'm not going to go through each one of them. I'm going to show you the commands, go through, and we're going to draw around. So if you want to do that while we're doing it, you know, I'll try to give you some time here and there for you to kind of piddle around with it as we're going. Or you can, you know, listen, take it in, and then, you know, later today, go through and back and listen to the, you know, lecture part if you want to, and skip through the not interesting part. The nice thing about videos. Okay, so we do chapter 1, so chapter 2. All right, well, so helpful stuff. Well, we do have the PowerPoint. Now, I will say this. I did not make the quiz for chapter 2. So don't pull your hair out over it if you can't find the answers. Use the G word to help you find answers if you can't find them in the book. And I'm going to try to figure out which questions. So Mr. Anderson made the quiz. As far as I know, he took the questions from the end of the chapter. Now, why would chapter questions not have the answers in the book? I don't know. No. I don't know. It shouldn't be. She's had the same book for, you know, I don't know when she started making this book, but the lady who's the author, I don't know if she made up the quizzes. But chapter 2 does not match up, if I remember right, because I had somebody online say, I can't find these answers in the book, or can't find them in the PowerPoint. I'm like, well, you do need to look in the book too. So anyway. Okay, so yeah, the funny thing is, I've been teaching this class for a while, right, with this book, and let's see, we'll just say that this version of the class in Ultra, I've been using for maybe 3 years total, maybe 2 or 3 years. I forget when we swapped over. Well, that's when I started using Mr. Anderson's shell, and then I just kind of make it my, you know, adjust things to my teaching style. You know, like, and some of his videos for chapter 2 may not work because some guy got all high and mighty about us using stuff from the book or showing the book on our video or something. So anyway. And the links may be messed up. So I'm going to redo them anyway because some of them need to be fixed. And if I'm going to keep teaching an online version of this, I need to have videos on there anyway. And besides, you guys, sometimes it's better for you sit there with headphones on and not listen to me, except maybe watch on the screen and listen while the person's going through the stuff. So anyway, so I'm just giving you a heads up. I don't know what happened with chapter 2, and I was going to talk with him and say, hey, Ed, where did we get all these questions? And if they are, I'm going to check and see if they are from the back of the book first, because they probably are. And then I'm going to be like, well, did your students mention this? Because you guys, actually, it was his class in the spring where I figured it out, and then I was reminded again when some people started going through it this time, and I'm like, how come my in-person people haven't said anything? So, just say it. Chapter 2, you may have to Google some of them. And the other thing would be is to help me with some of the questions that if you can't find it in the book, send me an email with questions that you weren't able to find, that you had a hard time finding, that was something, it wasn't, I don't get where this should be. Give me those numbers. Say chapter 2, question number 3, question number 5, whatever. And, or even, do a snip of the question off of the quiz maybe. That way, if for some reason it does the auto rotate thing where it randomizes it, then I can make sure that we're talking about the same question, okay? I hope it doesn't, because like I said, it should be the questions out of the back of the book. So I'm going to go back and look and see. All right, moving along. So there's that part of chapter 2 that, and in the future, as far as future chapter 4, chapter 6, chapter 8, if any of those are similar issues, let me know and let's figure this out so I can go back and fix stuff. So at least my class is fixed. He may have fixed his and just didn't tell me. I mean, it's okay. You forget that you do stuff. And, oh, yeah, I fixed that. And, oh, I forgot to tell you, didn't I? I've done that to him. He's done it to me. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's fine. That's just the way it is. So if you guys will help me out, that'd be great. But you have to email it to me. Don't send it to me in a message. Send it to me in an email. I know the messages come over as emails, but anyway, just send me an email and I can easily grab it, put it into a document, figure out who's on first. All right. Okay, so let's see. I don't remember for sure if this is really a great, awesome PowerPoint, but we're going to jog through it real quick and talk about it. Let's flash you again. Another one?
Nah.
No? Yeah.
Usually I do 4 or 5 in a row.
Yeah, my wife's roommate, she would sneeze like a mouse, and it would be like 7 of them in a row. Hang on. Okay. All right. You sure? Are you done? No? Okay. It's fine. It's all good. It's that time of year. So drawing in AutoCAD. So what does chapter 2 cover? How to navigate through, create drawings in AutoCAD's 2D drawing environment. Because the 3D environment sucks. It's horrible. Don't ever bother trying to draw in 3D in here because it's awful. The only people that know how to draw in 3D on here are people that figured it out a long time ago and then didn't want to use better stuff like SolidWorks or Inventor or, real software. Yeah, well, basically the 3D uses Boolean type, and actually some of your other programs like Blender and 3D Studio Max and maybe even Maya, they're kind of set up that way. And unfortunately, I mean, it would be cool if, I guess, if they had kind of come up with more. I feel like parametric modeling is more accurate because, like, what we used to have to do whenever I was in school, we used this thing called ModelMate, and basically you would save it in different sections because if it didn't do what you wanted to do and you needed to change something, you had to undo that. So, yeah, it was not fun, not easy. You couldn't really go back and adjust things. But we're doing 2D, so let's move along. So AutoCAD creates objects within a coordinate system. What's a coordinate system? You guys know what that is? Any ideas?
Like a grid, basically.
Yeah, a grid. Grid with what are they listed? Like something goes left and right, X goes left and right, and then Y goes up and down, right? Now the thing is, you got to remember that. Think of this as X and Y as you're looking down on it, okay? Like a top view, okay? X and Y, and then Z would come up towards you if we went into 3D. that's not how some of the modelers work, but that's okay. Because I've drawn things thinking that way, and then I pull it into my slicer to print it, and it's flipped sideways, and I'm like, really? So anyway, but let's not worry about that. Just X, Y, you're looking straight at it. X obviously is left to right, Y is up and down. Okay, so there are a couple of different kinds of coordinates, and we'll get to those here in a minute. But that's what we draw on is a coordinate system. So AutoCAD gives you tools to create accurate, professional-looking, detailed, and assembly drawings. This is what we call a detail drawing, which is part of what we call a working drawing set, which has all the rest of the parts and an assembly somewhere. So this is what you're going to end up doing at some point, or most of this. You're going to have circles, and you're going to have lines, and you're going to have dimensions and notes and things like that. But if you ever put the word through on anything, I'm going to come over and take your head off and smack you with it. No, I'm just kidding. But don't. I don't know why they haven't fixed some stuff in these books. It really drives me crazy because through is not a current standard that we use. In fact, they quit using it when I was in college. You know, when I got out of college in 1994, we weren't using that. So I don't understand if this person's been making this book since 1994 or 2000 or whatever, that they didn't get rid of this. You know, I know in Canada they had to have gotten rid of it too. And that's why a lot of this stuff in this book is metric, I think, because it was, you know, created by a Canadian author or set of authors or whatever. And that doesn't matter. That's just what it is. So anyway, we're going to create stuff that looks like this. All right, so drawing in AutoCAD, AutoCAD's workspace and user interface. So there are different things. So on your quiz, it might ask you something about, you know, what are the different workspaces that you can do in AutoCAD. There's 3D modeling, 3D basics, drafting, and annotation. Those are 3 options. We just use drafting and annotation because that is the only one that's worth anything. So when we start AutoCAD, it's already in the drafting and annotation workspace because that's pretty much typical of what people are going to use it for. So that's the default, should be. Now this is probably the 2020 version, but the reason that all these are all kind of clumped up together is because if you have a smaller screen, then it will group things like the layers, the blocks, the properties, the groups, the utilities, clipboard, and view. All those little parts of the ribbon, which is what that's called, they're all, you know, they can get crunched up like that if you have a smaller screen. So like on a laptop, it might look like this, but on my screen, it's going to look a little different. And I also don't have a white background, you know, for my space that I'm drawing in, which is called model space. And your ribbon color is probably different. I think most of ours are set up kind of like dark mode. So, yeah. But it's still the same idea. The status bar is still down there in the bottom. You still have a command prompt, and I'm going to show you how to dock that guy and make it bigger because the command prompt's really important. AutoCAD is probably the last man standing or close to it on software that has a command line that you can see what the program's doing. What am I doing? Where am I at? What am I looking for? You know, it's only going to do what you tell it to do, right? Most of the time. We don't have AI in that one yet. Or at least I don't think so yet. I don't get to go to the conference, so I don't know. But anyway, the other thing down there at the bottom left, you've got model and layout tabs. Well, the model and layout tabs, we're only going to work in the model space right now, but later on the layout, we're going to make a title block, which is just a border on a piece of paper and a bunch of things like your name and the date and the class and that kind of stuff. So we're going to do that later on when we get closer to chapter 4. At the end of chapter 3, we're going to make our template file. And we'll talk more about that. And we'll talk about layers and we'll talk about other cool stuff. But right now, we just want to learn a little bit about the area, bless you, of the AutoCAD screen. So we've got your drawing area here. That's that area right there. So the funny thing is, your monitors have gotten wider, but not taller, right? They used to be more square. Now they're more rectangle. Well, they are rectangles. I mean, some of them are really big rectangles, like 40 inches wide. I'm still not sure how to do that. I'd rather have 2 big monitors. But anyway, so my drawing area is kind of more of a rectangle, and it's kind of squished sometimes depending on my screen because I got that ribbon up there at the top. Now you can make the ribbon kind of hide if you want to, but to me that's kind of a pain because I use it and I type in information. So there's multiple ways to input information into AutoCAD. That's another thing that's different about it. It has a lot of hotkeys because when I learned how to use it, you type in the whole command, like line, offset. Let's see. What's another good one? You got fillet. You've got chamfer. Chamfer's a good one. That's a long one. You know, I guess coordinates, if you were wanting to, but then there's hotkeys like F keys, where like your hotkeys where you can turn some things off and on. And then you also, now we have the shortcut keys. So like you don't have to do control something. Now you can use control C to copy, but it's a different kind of copy than what we're going to learn about. I mean, it's the same kind of copy you're used to. There's another copy command that we're going to use. And you can also do paste because sometimes we need to use those things and it works fine. Now the funny thing is control C used to be escape, kind of. And instead of using the escape button, we would do control C to get out of the command so that it would clear it and say, hey, okay, I'm ready to start from scratch. Well, now you have to hit escape to do that. Main thing you want to remember is don't hit escape to finish out a command. You hit escape when you're in the middle of one and you don't want to be there and you want to restart. Because if you hit escape, like let's say you were typing some text in and you hit escape instead of hitting enter twice, part of your text will probably disappear. You have to retype it. Why do I know this? Because I've done it. Because you get in the habit of hitting escape. Because like other programs, I use escape a lot because, you know, the enter key doesn't work and you have to, anyway. So I hit escape to get things unselected and so on. Well, in AutoCAD, I do that as well. But to finish out a command, you should always hit enter. Now, the cool thing is, what I want to hope to ingrain in your brain and get you to do is there's more than just the 2 enter keys. You're like, there's more enter keys. Where are the other enter keys at? Well, the space bar actually acts as an enter key. And believe it or not, it's pretty cool because like when I was learning to draw, I had one hand on the mouse, the other hand on the keyboard, and I didn't always look at the keyboard because for some reason I knew where all those keys were. It wasn't from typing class. It was from AutoCAD class where I knew where line was without even looking half the time. Or I could glance down, hit it, and hit enter. You hit space bar with my thumb and keep trucking. So I use space bar a lot. The only time a space bar is a space bar is when you're using text. Then it's really a space bar. Okay, now that's not confusing at all, is it? So my goal by the end of the class is to get some or most of you using the space bar for the enter key and not thinking you have to go over and hit the enter key every time I say enter. You can also right click. That's an option as well. So, okay, lots of fun stuff. You're like, okay. Don't let it overwhelm you. It's really not that bad. And yeah, I've been doing it for 30 some years. Oh yeah, I get it. But it's really not that bad of a program to learn once you just have a few basic ideas. Okay? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, this is kind of the main screen. That big A up there, that's called the application button. That's one of your menus that you can use to get to some things, and we'll show you here in a minute. You also have the next to it, to the right, is quick access toolbar. Looks familiar, doesn't it? It should, because Word had it, Excel had one. Excuse me, other programs you've probably used have that kind of thing. So they have the ribbon where you've got different tabs where you can go to different things. So all that you can thank Microsoft for. Honestly, you could probably thank somebody else. I mean, Microsoft ripped stuff off of Apple. Of course, they own Apple basically. They kept them in.
Now they're starting to.
They kept them going. So anyway,
Yeah.
But they're the ones that they started doing it in mainstream Windows stuff. So now everything that runs on Windows has a ribbon. I don't do Macs, so they probably have had it for years. I know they kind of had that set up on the OS. Anyway. All right, so moving along. All right, so you got your drawing area. Yeah, you can change the colors. I remember at one point they tried to get us to go to a white background. And I said, no, I can't see. This is blinding me. And besides, the one thing that my teacher told me about, or taught me about CAD, was the purpose of being able to have all these different colors, they show up on black. So when we added this thing called a layout, where you have a piece of paper, does the piece of paper have to be white? Can you get paper in other colors? Yes, you can. So why can't I have a black piece of paper? Because what would happen is when you did a print preview of your drawing and you went over to this white background, yellow was like, I can't see that. So I just like, okay, well, let's just change our color of our paper, because the whole point of being able to have different layers and so on is to differentiate different objects on the screen. What better way to do that than colors, right? And I guess maybe I'm old school. Maybe that doesn't mean anything to people, but some people I know still use a white piece of paper, and I get a lot of their students and trying to get them to use color. I've kind of given up because obviously take 2 classes where you have to not use very much color. You end up with people that don't understand that black is not a color. Black doesn't show up on black. But if you have it set to white, AutoCAD automatically flips it over to black on a white piece of paper. People don't understand that. The teacher doesn't exactly tell them that either, but that's okay. I'll be nice. Things that you don't understand, it's okay. So what do? We adapt, we overcome, and I do it my way and try to explain to my students this is how it works and move on. But anyway, so your background color could be different. I showed people how to do that one time, and a guy, he had a maroon background, and then went in and changed all these different colors. I'm like, oh wow. Yeah, I can't see. I can't see on your screen, man. I'm gonna have to go get some glasses or something to tone that down. So anyway, but that's the cool thing about you can adjust this stuff. Do people do that usually? No, they don't want to take the time to change the paper color, or they don't want to adjust the back. And honestly, black works really good. That's why I just changed my paper. So it doesn't matter what color your paper is. Mine's going to be black no matter what on my computers. So when I pull stuff up, it's going to pull up so I can see it the way I like to. And somebody else can set it up the way they like to. And that's fine. Okay, so here's some things we're going to talk about. Limits and units. When you set up a drawing or you start a project, the first thing you need to do is you need to tell AutoCAD, how big of an area do I need to use so that zoom will work correctly. Otherwise, and now it may not even let you draw outside the limits. So think of it like a piece of property. When you buy a piece of property, you only have X amount of space, right? So you can only you can only put a certain size building, maybe, on that piece of property, depending on how big it is. Or maybe multiple pieces, multiple buildings, depending on how big it is. Well, AutoCAD kind of works like that in that you have the whole world out there. Like you can put the city of London in AutoCAD. I've seen it. It was really cool. I don't know how they did that 10 or 15 years ago, and the computer didn't die. They didn't tell me how. I don't remember how long it took it to come up. But it's like if you do the whole blue oval thing, the model for blue oval down here, if you pull up that whole thing in 3D in Revit or Navisworks or whatever, it takes a minute or two. And that's on a really, really good computer, high-end, lots of storage and mostly memory and processing power, right?
Take that lawsuit.
Right, so you have to have a lot. Like these have a lot, so you guys should be okay. We're not going to do anything that big. However, AutoCAD needs to know how much of that space am I going to use so that it can better zoom in and out and get you where you need to be. So the first thing you need to look at is the size of your object that you're going to draw. Part of that is units. Now the funny thing about units is AutoCAD doesn't care. One of the reasons AutoCAD doesn't mesh well with some other programs like MicroStation is because MicroStation, units are units to it. If it's millimeters, it's millimeters. If it's inches, it's inches. If it's feet, it's feet. AutoCAD's like metric inch. This inch drawing is 25.4 times smaller than the metric version of it because I can draw them both right here. And if I were to put them on a piece of paper and then scale them correctly, they would be the same size when I print them out physically on a piece of paper. But in reality, when I draw it in the computer, 1 unit is 1 unit in AutoCAD. It could be a millimeter, it can be an inch, it could be a mile if you want it to be, it could be a meter. AutoCAD doesn't care. Even though it says in there that you can set up using the wizard thing, you can set it up for millimeters or whatever. No, AutoCAD really doesn't do that. The only way that you can change it to metric is a piece of paper. You change your paper to a piece of metric sized paper. And no, I don't mean A0, A1, A2, A3, A4. I mean you take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and you say the units on that sheet of paper is metric. So now it has turned from 8.5 by 11 to like 297 by, I forgot what the other number is. 2 something, 3 something, whatever. Well, it won't be 3 something because 300 is like 12 inches. So let's say it's like 200 by 297. I honestly don't remember what it is. I'd have to convert it up. My point being here, draw everything full size. At any time in any CAD program, everything is full size. The only time we scale anything is when we print it out or turn it into a document to give to somebody. That's where we actually scale things. And we'll get to that later on. Okay, so know how big your thing is that you're drawing. Then you look at limits. Now, the only time that you set your units to something different, we aren't, because we don't have any architecture projects in this class. I wish we did, and maybe I should pull one in and have you guys draw one just so that you have experience. Oh, wait, I need to change the units to architecture so that it'll recognize feet and inches. And you're like, because, you know, this book doesn't cover that. It covers mechanical stuff. And maybe eventually I will. But I haven't done it yet, and that's not where we're going. So when you guys think about it, you need to think about the units as far as, is it a metric or inch drawing? Because that will determine the limits. How are you going to remember this? Well, we're going to go over it here in a minute using the example in AutoCAD. I will show you. All right, some other things you can do are pan and zoom. Anybody know what pan does? Yeah, it moves the area around the screen. In other words, it's like you took your hand, grabbed the screen, and dragged it, right? Dragged it left, right, up, or down. Which button does that? Yeah, it's your middle scrolly button. That's a button? Yeah, it's a button. It scrolls, but if you hold it down, that's your third button. I thought it was really cool to have a third button before they came up with Mr. Scroll Wheel there. Because I had a mouse, it was a Logitech, and it was a serial mouse. Ooh. But I mean, it was actually a CAD type mouse because you could program that middle button to do some other things, like pan. And then if you had one of those little wheels, not the thumb one, that one hurts my thumb to even think about. But you know, instead of a mouse, use a little ball. Roller ball. Can't think of what the right name for it is, but anyway. But I have one that had the ball in the middle with 2 buttons. Now, well, the cool thing about that is I could use my hand to move it around, and it didn't hurt my wrist as much. And then if I wanted to pan, you hold down the 2 buttons together, and you could pan and move around stuff. All right, so anyway, zoom. That's where you use the scroll button and you scroll in and out. The funny thing is when you go over to SolidWorks or another program, it's usually reverse of AutoCAD. And then you're like, I forgot. You go the wrong direction. Guaranteed, I go from one program to another all the time and have to remember, you know, which way is which. So anyway. Moving along, commands. So there's a lot of different ways you can do the commands. You got your application button is a way to get some commands, quick access toolbar, your ribbon panels, your command line or command window. The shortcut menus, status bar, and tool palettes. So before they came up with a ribbon, I used to use the little the shortcut menus. We call them toolbars. I don't know why they call them shortcut menus, but anyway, we call them toolbars. And so you just have a bunch of pictures, all the little icons for different commands, and I'd have draw on one side and modify on the other, and then if I needed something else, that'd be fine. Tool palettes are kind of cool because they stay up on the screen. They don't close out. So like layers used to be not a tool palette. It was just a extra little window that pops up, dialog box, that you had to interface with and then close before you could do anything else. Well, now you can have it hanging out over here, and if you need to adjust something, you click on layers. So when I want to check your layers, I can just go over, because I have it up there on the screen all the time, that one, and I have properties up. That's another one that's a tool palette that you can have hanging around. Then there's also another one that is just a tool palette that has a bunch of little tabs on it that you can put commands on, and some of them are already set up. Like I used to have it set up to where you could, I could draw house plans, and I'd have like my brick and my siding and my roof, shingles, all those things set up to where I could just drag and drop on the screen. So that's kind of how those work. And we'll talk about how you can customize things like the quick access toolbar, the ribbons, got your command window, which is the command line. You got your shortcut menu. So I use the pull down menus. I'll show you how to turn those on. Sometimes before they got the ribbon, kind of when they first came out with it, I couldn't find things. So I would go to my trusty pull down menus because I could find them there. So I'm going to show you multiple ways that you can access to find stuff. The status bar is down there in the bottom. There's some different tools we can turn off and on, make adjustments to, and that's kind of important. And then here's a tool palette. Like I said, that's the tool palette. It has a bunch of different tabs on it for different things. Okay, starting, saving, and opening a drawing. Yeah, you could type in Q new if you wanted to. There's also that nice little sheet of paper up there at the top, right? That's new, right? And then it pops up and it says, hey, what template do you want to use? Well, the one we use is the one that says AutoCAD.dwt. Now, eventually, you're going to make your own. And you will have your own that has settings on it that you want, like layers and colors and line types and things like that. But we'll get to that in Chapter 4. For now, we're just going to use the default AutoCAD.dwt and kind of go from there. I don't use this because I don't like it. It's the little wizard thing. Because the metric and inch thing, I don't agree with. Because I don't really feel like it really has metric on there. But anyway. And then half the time in the past, when I try to find it, I couldn't find it after the first time. I used it, and then it wouldn't come up for me. But anyway, if you have Q new set up, it says startup equals 0, and then it'll create a new drawing window. So I guess it depends on how you have new set up, which is Q new. Or I guess also it would be the little new button there with a piece of paper. But anyway, I don't use this, but this is the wizard, the little wizard thing that it has. And it says that you can do metric. It's not really metric, but anyway, it doesn't change your units. Okay, so there are different kinds of file types that happen, and they're missing one. Hopefully we go to the next page and it has some more. So DWG, drawing file. AutoCAD lucked out. They were the first one. They've been around for a while, so they were able to. I wanted it to be a drawing file, so I know that DWG file, that is an AutoCAD file. DWT, T is for template. Don't get that confused. I get people turning in their Chapter 4 stuff as template files instead of drawing files. You only use the template to start with. You don't actually open it. It opens up a copy of it, okay? So you don't actually go and open the template and then save it as something else, because that'll get you into all kinds of fun and trouble. All right, then we have things called DXF file. What's that use? Well, in Machine Shop, I can send a DXF file to those guys, and that will create 2D points inside their MasterCam program that they can pull up and turn into a machinable part, or a machinable program that they can run and create a part that way. DWS, it's a defines the properties for layers, dimensions, styles, line types, and whatever. And it's kind of a temporary file. It usually will just be open while you're working on that drawing. So if you ever go onto your storage area, whatever it is, whether it's a flash drive or OneDrive or the documents, whatever, and you notice that there's extra files, well, after you close out that drawing, they may go away because they were only open while that file was running. So, anyway. And the other one that people mess up with and send me accidentally are the backup files. AutoCAD creates a backup file. The problem with the backup file is how far along is it? When did it save? If you save it and then the power goes out, how far was it from the last time you saved it? Did it save? It might help you if you've been working for a while on something and then you'd saved it and then you're working on it and then lost power, the computer reset or whatever, and then you had to, pull it back up. The nice thing is AutoCAD will try to recover it, but if it can't, then there's a backup file that you can try to change the BAK to a DWG file. That's always fun, trying to change file types. And then, try to open it up. But if you send it to me, I'll just tell you, I'm sorry, that's not the right file. You need to send me a DWG file, please. Now, on files, when we go to the start screen, and when you're in a drawing, there are tabs up at the top. It tells you start, and then whatever drawing you're on, drawing 1, drawing 2, drawing 3. Hopefully you saved it as 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. The nice thing with AutoCAD is it doesn't freak out about numbering. Some of my programs, like SolidWorks or Inventor, it would be better if you put your initials on it. So if you feel the need to put your initials on a drawing file, that could be helpful because it differentiates it from other files. And we did talk about file management. File management is important so that you can go back and find the file later, right? Now, when you hover over a tab on here, it gives you the model, the layout, and layout. It gives you all the layouts and the model tabs. So sometimes when I'm clicking around trying to go between each drawing tab, that'll pop up because I hovered too long or didn't move fast. Well, I guess I hovered too long. But so you can actually click through the different areas to just open that specific part of the drawing when I just want to open the drawing. I don't care. So anyway, all right, coordinates. Your favorite part. The first, I think it's 3 drawings. You are going to create the drawing using AutoCAD, and then you are going to write down and submit somehow the coordinates that you use. Why? Because you need to understand how coordinates work. And if I don't make you write them down, then it's not going to make a difference. Now, did you have to draw it that exact way? No. It might be helpful. So there are basically, let's just say there's 2 basic kinds of coordinates. You have relative coordinates and you have absolute coordinates. Can anybody tell me what the difference between an absolute and a relative coordinate would be? Yes.
An absolute would be like on your grid, and a relative is like from where you start, like it's part of like what you're drawing.
Okay, relative doesn't matter what point you're at. It's where you're going to. Yes, basically that's what you're trying to say. Absolute means that I have to know the coordinate I'm at, and I have to know the exact coordinate of where I want to go. So that would be like if you were in a ship and you're at this GPS coordinate, and I need to go to that GPS coordinate over there. Those are absolute points in space. Whereas if I knew, I didn't care where I was at, but I knew that it was 2 miles at whatever angle, degree, to get there, that would be a relative one. Because I don't care where I'm at, I just know how far it is from this point to that point and the angle, let's say. Or if I was on a grid, let's say you're doing mapping and the orienteering for I don't know, the military or maybe scouts or something, and you have a grid, and you know what grid mark you're on, and you know what grid mark you want to go to. All you need to know is how much distance, X and Y over there, or the distance and the angle that you need to go, or bearing, if you will, on a compass. So as long as you keep that same angle and you step off those steps, however many steps it's supposed to be, then you should get to that point, right? The nice thing is there's a tolerance with that. Whereas we're actually in the computer, we're going to go specifically from this point to that point. We don't use absolute coordinates most of the time. However, if you do some of the tutorials in the book, you have to have, she uses absolute coordinates to make it turn out the way she wants it, or whoever created tutorials in the book. So keep that in mind, and I'll show you how to turn off a setting that'll make things all absolute, and you have to do something special to make them relative. All right, so Cartesian coordinates, that's X and Y. So as far as coordinate systems, they're saying that you have Cartesian coordinates and polar coordinates. So if there's a question in the book that says, what are the two coordinate systems used in AutoCAD? That would be Cartesian coordinates, which is X and Y, and polar, which is a distance or radius and an angle. Or distance and an angle, if you will, is really the way I look at it. But polar is what? Polar is anytime you say polar, you're dealing with a circle. Polar means circle. In our context, at least. Cartesian is rectangular, okay? X and Y. Polar is a circle. So that means that if I start from the spot and I know the distance, well, that distance would be the radius out from the spot I'm at, and then I have to determine the angle that I want to go. All right, so anyway. And then you have the 2D and 3D, like we said, X, Y, and then Z is our vertical dimension on that. And the origin is on our coordinates. You've done this all through school. You start out with the origin. You've got 4 areas, right? You've got 4 blocks around the origin. You've got your different quadrants, right? Quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4. I forget where you start from, but I do know that this one up here in the top right from the origin, if the origin is in the middle, and the origin is always 0, 0, okay? So if I go over to the right and up, it's always positive. Those are always positive coordinates. If I'm typing in a relative coordinate or if I'm typing in an absolute coordinate, I'm going to go over. Positive is right and up. Negative is left and down. So you have to remember that. Very important. Okay, so we're going to go through this here in a few minutes, but like if you use the line command, you just type in L, enter. Anytime you type anything in the computer in AutoCAD, you have to hit enter. Now, what's the other button that you can hit besides the two enter keys? You can hit space bar. And you can also right click. And if you have it set up like I like to have it set up, when I right click, it's enter in certain cases. In other cases, it's a command, it's a menu. I think the default is set up to where if you right click, it's a menu, and then you hit enter. I can't remember because I've changed mine all the time. Usually I change mine so that it's enter when I'm in the middle of a command. But I'll show you where you guys can change that as well. All right, so these are two absolute points. 2.1 or 2,1, 6,3. That would be an absolute set of points. I know exactly where they're at on the grid. Okay. Now, if I type in absolutely, 2,1, the start, 6,3, it'll look like that. But if I look at it as a relative coordinate, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 over. So that would be 4, 2 would be the relative version of that. Now, that wouldn't put me necessarily in a specific spot unless I started at 2,1. But if it's relative, then I would type in 4, 2, and that would get me in that same spot. If it's absolute, and I started at 2,1, then I have to type in 6, 3 to get there. Okay, so absolute versus relative. All right, so polar. What polar is, now, relative commands or relative coordinates should start with an @ symbol. Funny thing is there's a setting called dynamic. When it's on, all your stuff is input as relative. But I always use, or I try to use the @ symbol just so that I get in the habit of making, I know that I'm doing relative. But since most things are relative, coordinate-wise, in AutoCAD, they just made that the default, where if you turn on dynamic, everything's relative. The only problem is when you want to do a polar coordinate, how does it know you want to do a distance and an angle? AutoCAD doesn't. So what you have to do is you have to use the @ symbol. You use the @ symbol, which is Shift-2. And then you put in a distance, then you do Shift, to get your angle symbol, and then you put in the angle. And you're like, okay, well, how are the angles set up in AutoCAD? Well, I'll let you know. So let me see, do they have it on here somewhere maybe? There we go. So AutoCAD is set up with 0. 0 is east, okay, it's to your right. 90 degrees is north, 180 degrees is west, and 270 is south. If you want to think of it like a compass, directions. So from 0 to 90, that's where we normally work at, and that's kind of where they start at. That's why we start on the right-hand side, I guess, because that's the coordinate area that we kind of work at. I guess that's why they came up with it. Well, anyway, that's the default. Now you could really mess with people and switch it to where it goes the opposite direction, go clockwise. That'd really mess with people. But the way it's defaulted to set up, okay, is 0 is right there on the right-hand side, which is where it always is, either way. And it's going to start going counterclockwise for the angle. What you have to remember is when you look at an angle on a drawing, are you measuring it from the horizontal axis or the vertical axis? It makes a difference. I will show you on one of your drawings why. Okay. So here is where you would put in a polar one. So they have, they picked a point that they started at, and then they said, okay, I want to go 2.5 at an angle of 60. Okay, so that's your first point. Oh, that's okay. Sorry. When I do polar coordinates, I'm usually already starting from a spot, and I want to go to a certain spot and draw a line. What they did here is, this is an absolute point, because the first point you type in is always absolute. So like if you want to start on 0, 0, you type in for your first point, instead of just clicking somewhere, you type in 0, 0. Or if we wanted to start at 2.5 at 60 degrees, or angle 60 degrees, we could type that in as our, and that's the reason there's no at symbol, because that's an actual coordinate, like absolute coordinate. That's not how I use it. I always am using it relatively from something else. So my relative one is actually the one down here at the bottom. I'm assuming it would have to be, yeah. So it's relative from the 2.5 angle 60 down to the one that's 7 angle 10 degrees. So what that means is it's going down at 7, unless they started. See, it's a horrible example because that's not how we use it most of the time. You're not going to waste the time figuring out a starting point like that. You know why? Because it's so much easier to just pick a starting point and then draw from there. So this is that example is not going to work. Now I realize why, because, yeah. So what they're saying here, okay, basically they're starting from 0, 0, and they've got 2 different points. I'm not sure how they connected the points, because usually you go from point 1 to point 2. Now, if it's 7 from, it's not, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm not exactly sure why that's a good example. It's not. Maybe I should make my own example. Anyway, okay. If the start point of a line is unknown to you, you can enter a relative coordinate point. The symbol at is placed before the coordinate point for it to be relative. Okay, let's go with this. So, this is relative. This is more in line with what we're going to do. You've got at 4, 2. I started from a spot, don't care where I'm at. And I go over 4 and up 2. So that's what I was talking about, the relative version of what they just showed us. Okay. All right. And then if you want to specify a starting point, like I said, the first point is always going to be absolute. And then after that, everything's relative if dynamic is on. The funny thing is it's not visible as a default. But I'll show you how you can figure that out. And then what they do here is they do at 5 angle 25. So from that point, it's 25 degrees going up towards the right, and the length is 5. All right. Honestly, WCS and UCS, that is a more advanced concept. And even though I probably should show you how it works, I'm not going to, because the only people that use this are civil people. And honestly, it's a concept that really I technically would consider advanced, because what happens is if I show you this and you mess with it, you end up screwing things up. No offense, because you don't really know what you're doing yet. So this is a tool, world coordinate systems and user coordinate systems. These are things where you're actually rotating in 3D where you're looking at. Now, AutoCAD will not draw unless you have it set to where you're looking at whatever side it is. You know, you have to set the coordinate system so that it knows that you're looking at XY, which is default, or XZ, or YZ, something like that. That's where this comes in, where you're like rotating in 3D. We're not worried about that. So just know that there is a world coordinate system and a user coordinate system, but we're not going to go into it because it's not really in our gameplay or ballpark, okay? I mean, this is where you get in the weeds if you're not careful. You see where it says the X and Y, and then it's rotated and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we're not going to fool with that. But those are things that if you were in the civil world, that you have to play with and mess with. So anyway. Now, something else you can turn off and on, which it's nothing that I really use, is you can tell it to turn the coordinates off or on so that it shows you what coordinate you're at. Might be helpful in certain situations, like if you were in a civil world, but for us, it's, anyway, but it's there. And that's how you turn it on with the coords command. Okay. All right, one of the things that you're going to do in Chapter 2 that we're going to do maybe before lunch, hopefully, is called the print tutorial. And we're not going to physically print anything, but we're going to create a PDF file. Now, there's a couple of different ways we can do that. And I have a video that shows you how to do it one way. And then I may do it a different way in class. So you got two options. And we'll kind of go from there. Probably ought to update my video. But anyway, it gets the job done. So there are different places you can print, right? So you guys don't know what Paperspace is yet, but you will. But you can set up a print in Model Space, which is where we're going to start. That's the black area that we start with, where you draw everything. The only thing that we draw on the Paperspace is our border and title block. We don't do any actual like parts and stuff on there. In fact, it's not a good idea to even dimension on there, but you can. It's a whole lot better to do everything that you want to do with your object in model space. So anyway, these are the options you have: display, extents, limits, and windows. Those are, and then you can also specify a print region too, or window. So this is just an example of this is what you see, box indicating the limits. This is what it prints for display. Okay. And then that's extents. That would be limits, because our limits are set up to the edge of our paper. So printing preferences are set up in page setup in the model window, because that's where we're going to be right now, is the model space. And they can be drawing specific. So it may not make any sense to you now, but if you set up if you specify a printer, let's say you created a file and you said that the printer needed to be one of our printers over here. And you go home and you open it up on your computer, which has a different printer. It'll give you a message saying, hey, this printer not found. And then it'll change the printer either to nothing or something else. And guess what happens? You go over to your layout, all your stuff gets moved. Isn't it great? So what I came up with is, you know what? For the most part, we create PDF files of things that we want to share with other people. We don't technically print them out per se, and if we wanted to, we could print out the PDF just as easily. So to keep AutoCAD from screwing around with our title block and stuff on our layouts, if you set it to a PDF file that I'll show you, it works better. I can't get that across to people, but there's a reason for my madness on certain things, partially because I've been doing this for 30 years. Anyway, you can't change people unless they want to change. Just not the way it works. Even when you explain it to them, if it takes effort, they may or may not remember to do it. Just remember that. You can't change people. You can influence people. And you can try to help them to change, to see your point of view, and hopefully adjust to your point of view, because, you know, obviously your point of view is right, or at least we think it is. And you can go into all kinds of weeds with that one, but I'm not going to. Our world is just really screwed up right now. Has been for a while, but that's kind of common knowledge. You can say I'm half empty or half full. You pick. It doesn't matter. So plotting, what does that mean? Well, plotting is printing. Okay, and basically that's what we used to do with those big printers over there, because they had ink pens in them, and they would plot out literally with lines with a pen. It was really cool. It was fun to watch because you didn't know where it was going. It would start over here, it'd draw for a while, then it'd go over here and draw for a while, then it'd go over here. I mean, you know, it was better than drugs. Seriously. I don't know what it would be if you were impaired and you watched it. Maybe it's cooler. I don't know, but not impaired and watching it, it was really awesome because it's like, wow, that's really cool, man. I'm perfectly sober. Yes. It's just neat because it starts over here. It's kind of like my laser. My laser does the same thing. It does over here and it cuts something out. Then it comes over here and then it'll do it. And then it'll come over here. And you're like, you don't know because I drew that first. Why is it over here? So anyway, the new ones don't do that because it just goes back and forth and spits it out. Back and forth and spits it out. So they're kind of took the fun out of plotting. Also made it easier, so, but anyway. All right, moving along. So there are some different scales that we're going to deal with. 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 4. Obviously 1 to 1 is full size, 1 to 2 is half size, and 1 to 4 is quarter size. So those are some things that you need to keep in the back of your brain. However, even though a drawing may not be able to be printed full size, it should always be drawn full size or full scale in the CAD environment. So we always draw everything full size, period. Okay? That's something you should carry even if you don't use this. But if you do, you should definitely remember this. Very important. Always draw everything full size. Okay. And the funny thing is, they have this little thing that says, although it's nice to print things to scale, the ASME standard states that no dimension should be measured directly from the printed drawing. Well, why the heck did I print it off for? So I could see it with dimensions on it. So I could take it somewhere and make it. Yeah. But you're not supposed to measure to it because technically it could be off a little bit. Which is why when we did these by hand, humans are not perfect. And so you would have to make sure that your measurements, you'd actually have to go back and do the math and make sure all your measurements added up. So if I was doing a house plan, I had to make sure if the house was 48 feet long, all those measurements that were in between that 48 had to match up. So I had a calculator and I would do that. Now, CAD makes it a lot easier, right? Because they should all add up like you're supposed to. And then when I print it off, give it to the guy to build it, then you can take it and run with it because he's not going to measure on it because he shouldn't. Had some people do that, telling me that the framing guys didn't get with the contractor to find out what the rough size was for the windows. So they were just measuring off of the plan. Well, honestly, all you're supposed to get off of the plan is the center of where they're located. And you don't measure that off the plan because it's given. So anyway, caused a big old mess. The contractor was just shaking his head like, really, guys? Got the owners all Twitter-pated and everything. They were trying to find a reason that my plan was screwed up. Anyway. So, for drawings that have no scale, the word none is used. Okay, I don't ever do this because, for the most part, we're going to have ours set up to where they scale to a certain size. Now, these first drawings you guys do, we're not worried about scale or how as long as I can see what you've got on the screen and I can check things, that's fine. That's the main thing. All right, so there's a lot of commands and I'm not going to go with them over here because showing them to you is kind of goofy when I should just show you what they really mean. So we're going to step through all these and we're going to hit this real quick. Object snaps. These are all the different symbols for object snaps. Do not turn all of them on. Only turn on the ones that you commonly use. Have you ever heard of the thing that you can have too much of a good thing? Well, this is very true because what can happen is you wanted a midpoint. Well, don't ask me who came up with the idea of nearest being a good option. But apparently nearest is okay. I don't use it because I like things to be accurate. But if you turn that on and it doesn't find the midpoint, it finds nearest to the midpoint, well, it's not exact. So then something might be off on your drawing. So like I use endpoint and midpoint. Midpoint is not a default turn on, so I turn it on. Intersection, center, quadrant, I turn off and on. There's also one called geometric center, which should have been on this, but maybe they didn't have that in 2020, and I got to update I thought I updated my stuff on here, but I'll have to do that. Anyway, I don't keep tangent on, I don't keep perpendicular or parallel on, and I sure as heck don't have nearest on at all, ever. Don't ever use nearest. Now, Mr. Spalding told me he used nearest for something that he was trying to draw. And I was like, you did? Okay. Apparently he came up with a use for it. But it was like I think it was in SolidWorks, and it was like I don't know, it was some kind of weird 3D sketch thing or something. I don't know, like something very advanced that I wasn't going to fool with. So don't ever do nearest. Live demonstration. I'm not going to click on that. Probably goes to a site I don't want it to go to. You're like, really? Really? Let's click on it. Now, we don't use the toolbar, but these are all the different kind, what the symbols look like, kind of. And I'll show you where they are. They're actually on your taskbar down there at the bottom. Or status bar, sorry, not taskbar. Status bar down there at the bottom right. Anyway, and you can also get to them under drafting settings, which there's some other stuff here that we can do as well. We'll worry about later. All right, selecting objects, polar tracking. Aha, polar tracking. So when I started drawing, there was this thing called ortho. Ortho means things go left and right and up and down only, period. So you turned it on if you wanted to make vertical lines or horizontal lines. Well, they came up with this cool thing called polar, which also helped us to get something else called object tracking or O tracking. So if you have O snaps, which are object snaps on, you have your polar tracking on, and which is your polar angle, or just polar is what I call it, and then your object tracking, which is O track. Those things can do some really cool stuff because you can find virtual points without drawing a line. Used to, I had to draw, construction geometry to find a point. Well, I don't have to do that if I have these turned on. Polar gives me angles, so I can set my polar angle to 15 degrees, so I can have it locked, kind of like a drafting machine, every 15 degrees, all the way around the circle. So if I know that it, and a lot of your drawings in CAD and drafting are set up on 15-degree increments. It's either at a 30, a 60, 75, 90, obviously, 0, 45. Those angles are fairly typical. Well, if you set up your polar at 15 degrees, you got it covered. You're good to go. Anyway, we'll talk about it more here in a minute. O tracking is where you can actually find virtual points. Dynamic input. So you're like, hey man, I don't see dynamic input on my thing. Where's it at? Well, we have to make it visible. Not turn it on, but make it visible. We have to differentiate there. Because if I say turn it on, people are like, you mean it's off? Well, no, it's defaulted as on. It's just you can't see it because we want everything to be relative. If we need it to be absolute, then we would have to turn dynamic off. And the only time we really need absolute is our first point anyway, so it's always absolute. So why would I worry about turning it off and on? So anyway, that's why you don't see it. It's not visible. But I'll show you where you can turn it off and on. As far as visibility, not off and on, but visibility. See, don't get messed up. We have grips. Anytime you pick something, you get these little blue boxes. If you click on the blue box, it turns red. At least that's the default. When it turns red, then you can edit it. Right there, it's just selected. Until I click on something red, and to make it red, it's just selected, and then I can do something with it. We don't do parametric drawing. That's more advanced. Basically, that's where you can make things parallel or perpendicular. I use some of that stuff in my some other classes that I teach in 112, but for the most part, we don't need to use it. It just makes things too complicated. So, but they show you how to do it. where you can put constraints on things and so on. All right, that was great, wasn't it? Awesome. Woohoo! All right. So I need to go back and get the 24 or 26 or whatever and slap it on there. Okay, so that was a PowerPoint. There's a status bar. It's probably a video. No, status bar video. No. I don't know if it's that important anymore. But anyway, I have an AutoCAD orientation video. And then I also have a video for the AutoCAD print tutorial. I have one on coordinates if you need to brush up on that. And lines, polylines, circles, and then arcs, ellipses, and the rest of draw. I don't remember having the modify commands on a separate video. Maybe I need to do that one too. But anyway, these are things that you have access to. Now, I'm going to do a live demo and go over everything. And of course, we'll break for lunch and then we'll come back. But however you want to do it, you have options for coming back later if you want to, and watching videos and so on. So if you don't like listening to me right now and you want to go specific, I don't know. It's just a different video. It's still me. It's just a previous me at a previous time in a previous place. So I either did it here or I did it at home, depending on which one, but still. So those videos are already on there. I'll have this, obviously you'll have the video on the class under Collaborate, and I'll probably download this and dump it into my other class just to see if it is helpful to them. Made a video for the word part, and it's still confused at least one person, and I'm like, went through the trouble to make a video to hopefully help clear things up, and they still end up in the wrong spot. Maybe we don't need to do the review problems, because apparently that's what screws everybody up. Oh, well, I was doing Hamilton. What's Hamilton got to do with anything? You're supposed to be doing comedy. Anyway. So, I'm sorry. It's just, I don't get it. My job is to try to help you guys, hopefully figure this stuff out. So if you have questions, please ask. If you don't get it, it's okay. Sometimes it takes a little while for stuff to click. Don't be scared of AutoCAD. It's a cool thing to learn. It's not hard if you just try. Watch the videos. Do the stuff in the videos. Stop and start the videos. It's fine. Whatever you want to do. Okay. Let's see. So basically, we're going to do the printing tutorial. Hopefully get that turned in for lunch, maybe. There's a Chapter 2 quiz handout, Chapter 2 quiz. Like I said, if there's some that you had, the ones that you had to Google or something, let me know which ones they are so I can, maybe we can help figure out how to make it better. Okay, we're going to do 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.7, 2.8, 2.11, and 2.12. And you're like, okay, where are those? How can I find those so I can just go ahead and start on this because I know what I'm doing? Or I think I do. Okay, well, that stuff starts on, oh my, 2-140, should be 5. So you look at that. There are from 2-5 to 2-144. That's, and now some of that we're not going to worry about. Like, so there's the 47 questions that he supposedly used in the quiz, which could be the questions that he used. We just have to figure out where the answers are, right? All right, so there's those. And then we don't worry about the geometric crap because that's more advanced. Let's see. Oh, there's fillet. You need to know fillet. So definitely up to 2-120 you're going to use. And then you may skip, no? I guess that's it. So yeah, pretty much everything from 2-5 to 2-120 is stuff that you're responsible for. And then when you want to start drawing, we're going to do 2-145. Okay. Everybody clear as mud? Good. That's where we want to be. All right, so let me figure out which one I got here. That's 24. That's 25. That's mechanical. All right, well, let's try 2025 and see if it works. Now, like I said, you need to have, to get this to work at home, you have to have an AutoCAD login. So you have to go to Autodesk Education, sign up, use your school email. The address for the school is 620 College Street Road, Elizabethtown, Kentucky, 42701. It should pop up, and they'll still make you type in part of it anyway. And then you use it's elizabethtown.kctcs.edu, I think is the website. But you can just go look up ECTC's website, copy and paste that into the URL thing, and it should grant you access. Hopefully. If it doesn't automatically, give it some time, let it do its thing, percolate. That's why I had to try to get you to do it first day for the first week, so that 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, starting, boom, you're ready to go. All right, so you'll notice I've opened up a few drawings. You probably may have some example drawings on yours, and that's okay when you pull it up. If it asks for you to log in, you're probably not in 2025. Apparently the server still works. For now. So you've got options over here. So you're under the start thing, and it says open and new and all this fun stuff. So when you click on the little arrow right here, for new, you've got ACAD.dwt, and then I've got a test one for some reason. And there's the one I created at some point, because I didn't put a date on it, I guess. But those are all options for a starting file, which is a template file. Now, I'm not opening. Notice it's not under open, it's under new, okay? So we just click on ACAD DWT, and it starts off here. Now I'm going to close out this guy and this guy. Those were toolbars, or tool palettes, sorry. A tool palette will stay up on the screen. If it's a dialog box, you have to close it. And what do you mean by dialog box? Well, a dialog box is if you right-click, go to Options, and this pops up. Well, you can't do anything until, notice my little, until I hit OK. Now, why did I show you options? Because there are some options that we can change later on. But I just want to show you the difference between a dialog box and, let's say I right-click and I don't have any selected, so it's not going to let me do properties. Okay, well, fine. We can type in properties. PR. See, if you start typing something, it'll give you options like PRO. Oh, do you want properties? Do you want properties closed? Do you want profile? What do you want? I want properties, so I'm going to click on properties. And then it pops up here. And this is a tool palette. I can stick it wherever I want. Right now it's in the middle of everything, and I don't like that, right? But I'm going to stick it over here on the left because that's where I want it. Now I could stick it over here. I could even mount it if I wanted to. And I could have it sticking right there on the side. I can even have it right there. If I don't want it there, I can come up to the top, I can grab and I can drag it and move it down. And then if I wanted it over here, I could hit this second button down where it's on auto hide. So then if I hover over it, it opens. If I go off of it, it goes away. It's kind of nice. Might be nice to have it on that side for a little while. I usually have it on the left. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm left-handed. Who knows? All right. Another one that we're going to play with later on is called layer properties. This is another one that if I hover over it, it's off and on, or you can tell it to stay on, like that, by clicking the little button there. And you'll notice that I only have one layer. In some of the videos, some people thought it would be great to show you how to change line types and things. Well, you guys don't know that yet. You don't even know what a line type is. So you know what? We're not going to use that until you need to know it. But I digress. I guess I should be nice. So I'm going to stick Mr. Layer over here, I guess, so that he's out of the way there and my properties are over there. Now, do you have to have these up? No, you do not. I'm just showing you what things are. All right, obviously you got the ribbon up here at the top. Notice it looks a lot better than the one in the book. Everything's all opened up. We're going to talk about the drawing part here. One of the things that before we start drawing is let's talk about this guy down here, the status bar. You'll notice if you hover over things, it tells you what it is. Model or paper space. I've got display drawing grid. I've got dynamic mode, input, which you don't have on probably. Ortho mode, which I like to get rid of. Polar, and then ISO draft, and then object snap tracking, and then object snap. And then I can come over to the next one, which you don't have, is show or hide line weights. Then there's selection cycling, show annotative objects, add scales, annotation scale, and then this plus thing with monitor. Not sure what that is. I don't remember what it does, but I'm not worried about it. Here's units. You don't have that one turned visible. And then there's isolate objects and then clean screen. And then if you click on the three little lines, you get an option. What is the option? Well, it's to turn off or on the visibility of these things. Like, some people don't like the grid. It bothers them. You can't even see mine. I can, because it's in the background. I don't care. If I didn't want it on, I could turn it off. Or I could tell it to be the old dots that it used to be. Then you'd see it, maybe. But anyway, it's like wallpaper to me. It's there. I don't use it. And you're probably, well, why is it there? Why do we have a grid? Well, the reason there's a grid is because we talked about coordinates, right? So what if you wanted your stuff to click on the coordinate blocks, just like you had grid paper? Well, there's a thing called snap. It's not where you go, oh snap, it doesn't work. Or you snap your fingers and, you know, your room cleans itself, like on Mary Poppins. No, what this is this means that it snaps to each of those grid points. So then you have to go in and set up your grid to the size you need it to be, right? So if you needed it to be a 0.25, or 3 millimeters or whatever, you'd have to go under the grid settings and fix that. And you're like, what do you mean? Well, so that's, right now I have it visible. And of course I have model space visible because we're gonna use that. Snap, I don't have it turned on. You know why? Because I don't use it. If you ever can't hook onto something with an object snap because you got it, like, why won't this point go line up here? I can't move it there. Well, for one, either you're out of limits or you've got snap on. So what do? Snap off. I turn it off. I just turn the visibility off so I don't even have to worry about it because I do not use it. Now, yes, there might be a use for it somewhere down the line. Could be. Some people start out their books where they start you off using snap, and no, I just skip it. It's pointless. In the real world, do we use it? No, at least not normally. There might be a spot for it somewhere, but I don't use it. Most people don't use it. So I have it turned visibility off. So my visibility for snap is off. I don't want it. I turned it off. Does that mean it's off? It's already off. Now, could I still turn it on? Yeah. There's I think that's F9. Yep, snap on, snap off. Stop. They picked the most annoying sound. I should probably go in there and change that. One of the most annoying sounds for some reason for whenever you get an email, whenever you have it on the webmail. I don't know why that bothers me, but it does. You guys don't care, so it doesn't matter. All right, so moving along. Infer constraints is another option. I don't care about that. Dynamic input. Yours is not visible. You should turn it visibility on just so that I can show you what it does. There is a time and a place to use it, and a time and a place to just leave it on. So visibility should be on. Now the other one is ortho. Ortho is the one that locks you in to left and right, up and down only. Horizontal, vertical, period. Yeah, bless you again. So there are some people who can't get over the fact that I have to use ortho. That's what I learned on. Oh my gosh. Well, you know what? I did too. But polar is so much better. You ever find a tool, there's a guy likes a specific tool to do a certain job. And then, you're watching Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and you go, well, that's neat. I need one of those. Because, it does something different. Well, and then before you know it, you're using a different tool. You have to be open to change, especially when it comes to software. And I'm speaking to myself too, because they screwed up trim. They went too far. Let's just say that, and I'll explain. But it's different, and it's not a different that I really like. But I've learned how to adapt and overcome over it. So Polar was a tool that I thought was pretty cool because I never did like ortho because it only let me go left and right and up and down. So give me something that'll lock. I can draw things at whatever angle, but then it locks every 15 degrees or 30 degrees or whatever. That's awesome. So anyway, I thought it was a cool tool. So I am going to turn the visibility off for ortho because I don't like it. I'm not going to teach you how to use it. But it's there. What if you had to go back and figure out how to draw using ortho? Heaven forbid you don't know what it is. So I guess I should show you what it is and then go back and turn it off. So I'll turn it back on, but I don't use it. I use polar tracking, isometric drafting. We're going to use that in Chapter 6. Object snap tracking or O tracking, and then 2D object snap. Those are good ones to have on because you're going to use them. Now, do you need to have line weights on? No. I do, so that I can get the lines to show up here on the screen better. It takes me a second to get things to work so that you guys can see it on the projector. Now, the recording and at home, you're going to see it anyway. Transparency, I'm not worried about. Selection cycling, I mean, that might be handy, but that's up to you. I don't need 3D object snap. Dynamic UCS, don't want that. Selection filtering, that could be an okay thing to use. I guess we'll turn it on and see what it does. Gizmo, I don't even know what that is, to be honest. Annotation visibility, you need that. Auto scale, you need that. And annotation scale, those need to be on. Because when we actually get to dimensioning, you're going to have to use those. All right, workspace switching. We're not switching, so we don't care. Annotation monitor. You don't really need to have that on. I'm not exactly sure what it does. Again, I'll have to go back and look. And then units. Now, why do I have units on here? Because I can. You're not going to change units, but you still need to know if it's a metric or an inch drawn. But I can show you how it works and everything. Okay, quick properties. I don't like quick properties. I like the full properties, so that's me being me. But, anyway, lock UI, I'm not worried about that. Isolate objects, I'm honestly not sure why I have that one on. Graphic performance, not worried about. And clean screen. Clean screen just basically wipes everything off the screen. I'm not sure what a good reason for that is. I do know on Windows, in the bottom right corner, if you click on that clean screen, then it goes back to your desktop. But in fact, I'm just going to turn that visibility off because I don't really see a point. So those are the ones that I'm using. Like I said, I turned off. Well, I'll show you how Snap works, and then I'm going to turn it back off. Anyway. Okay, so let's look at our status bar down here and kind of go from there. So you've got grid, so if you turn that off, you got a black space. Turn it back on, you've got a little grid in the background. Snap on. So snap only works whenever you're in a command. So when I go into line, now you'll notice that it's hooking on to, see how my cursor is kind of zipping around? And then if I do that, then it's going to each one of those little grid marks. But that means you actually have to count grids. I do that when you can just measure and type in the distance. All right, so that's why I don't use snap. Here's dynamic. So the difference between dynamic is if I go to line and I pick a point and then I type in 10, 1, that is relative to where I'm at. It's 10 over and 1 up from where I started. All right, if I type in, take dynamic mode off, and I go line, enter, and I pick the endpoint of this guy, that's an object snap, and then I type in 10, 1. It went over there because that's the absolute coordinate. So that's the difference between having dynamic off and on. If you turn it off, everything is absolute. So how do you get a relative coordinate? Okay, well then you would type in at 10, 1, and then it would go relative to that point, 10, 1. This is why I always got in the habit of using the at symbol for anything that's relative. Well, when you have dynamic turned on, So let's turn that, and I hit enter to finish out my enter command, okay, or my line command, okay? So then if I were to turn dynamic back on, which is where it should be, and I do line, and I pick here, and I type in 10, 1, it's relative, right? It's, the first point can be absolute, always. But when I turn on that, now I don't have to put the @ symbol to make it relative. So then if I go to line, and I wanted to make a polar coordinate, how do I make a polar coordinate? Well, if I start typing in a distance and I say 5, okay, right now it thinks I'm doing a regular coordinate, right? A relative coordinate. So then if I do shift, comma, now it's like, oh, hey, man, you want to do a polar coordinate. Okay, what angle do you want? So then I have to figure out what's the angle that I want. Maybe I wanted -10, so I can go down. So I'm going to do 5 at -10. All right, well, I can also do this. I can do line, pick, I can do shift at, and then put in my distance, and then do shift, comma also, and it's still going to be a relative polar command, okay? So what I'm trying to get across to you is pay attention to your pointer right there. The other thing is if you turn dynamic off, that goes away. There's nothing that shows up at your pointer for the most part, and that is so much good information because it lets you know what's going on. Helps you to see what commands you're looking for. You know, preview if you start typing in, gives you the startings of your coordinates and all that stuff when you're inputting those things in. That's why having dynamic on is a good thing. And everything's relative. Okay? All right. I didn't put in a point, so now it doesn't like me. So I'm going to do at 6, angle 80. Okay. So relative coordinates, X and Y. Don't care where I'm at. I know where I want to go to. X and Y from where I'm at. Polar coordinates, these angles. I have a chart that I need to make bigger and put back up on the wall. Find it, or I could remake it. But here's an angle chart. I can even give you a personal one if you want. But this is the rotation that it goes. 0 around counterclockwise. If you want to go down or to the left, and it's a relative coordinate, x, y. Remember, down is negative and left is negative. Right and up are positives. Okay? All right. Let's see. It's almost lunchtime, so I think that's a good spot to kind of go from. So, like I said, on the polar, so like I turned ortho off because I don't want to use it. You can't have ortho and polar on at the same time. So use the one that looks like a little duck there. And then you can go in and click the little down arrow next to any of those boxes to get options. So like for this one, and I'm almost done. Like I have mine set on 15, 30, 45, 60. Okay. Then there's ISO tracking. There's options for it, which we'll talk about later. I always have O tracking on. And here's my object snap. So here's the list of ones that I use. I've got endpoint, midpoint, center, and then there's geometric center. That one's actually pretty cool because if you draw a polygon, which I'll show you later on after lunch, you can't find the center of it easily unless you have this on. It's really cool. There's a guy on Facebook. He's this electrician guy. He uses the F word a lot, but I kind of overlook that because he always says, "Damn, that's pretty cool." And usually the stuff he's talking about is really cool and interesting. So I overlook his language and kind of move on. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff on the internet you have to overlook the language because, you know, in other countries, that word just is normal. And sometimes here it's kind of like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. And then some people, it's just, that's their normal language. And you're like, oh, okay. Just goes to kids' ears. Anyway, quadrants, intersection, extension, that's another one that wasn't on the thing, the PowerPoint. And then apparent intersections. Those are the ones that I keep on. And so I'll leave that up for right now. But that's how you can set the object snaps. And then later on, we'll talk about the annotation stuff, because that's when we're doing dimension and text and stuff. We're going to talk about text, but we're not going to worry about the annotator stuff right now. Okay, so that's all we're going to do for right now. After lunch, we'll come back. We'll start in on all the draw commands, see how far we can get on the modify, see how that works. All right, well, y'all have a good lunch.
Hey, Mr. Doe.
Yeah.
If you want to vote your sheet, what I looked up will be automation monitor routine.
Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to go lunch, and I'm going to